Hi, it's Dwyer, keepingitfree.blogspot.com. Before the presidential election, on my other YouTube account, it's a popular sports betting account here on YouTube where I talk about betting strategies on sports like boxing, for example. Dwyer 70905. I made the prediction that Mitt Romney would be elected the next president of the United States. Right? I thought that in my lifetime, Barack Obama was the weakest, most vulnerable incumbent up for re-election. Lousy economy, lingering unemployment. In fact, unemployment, as I make this video, at depression levels, greater than 14% in the black community. You had a president who spent billions of dollars on shovel-ready jobs that, by his own admission, weren't shovel-ready, right? You had ludicrously ineffective political programs like Cash for Clunkers that ended up costing cash payers north of $20,000 per car, right? You had the use of public treasury money on failed startups like Solyndra that, quite frankly, most businessmen would not have considered worth the investment, right? You had a bailout of General Motors using public money at a time when Ford was gaining market share and was thriving financially. And of course, the bailout was part of a managed bankruptcy, the same bankruptcy that Mitt Romney had been pushing when the situation was unsettled and GM was having financial problems in 2008, right? And so you had a president who was vulnerable really on several fronts. Mitt Romney made several mistakes. These mistakes are very deep and very broad. They're much deeper than failing to attract the votes of people of color, although that's a big faux pas as well. Let's talk about what cost Mitt Romney the election, right? Here's my opinion. It's just one man's opinion. And for the record, I was not a Romney supporter. I voted for Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, right? In fact, I've never voted for a Republican for president of the United States in my life. You know, let me just say too, that if you think it through, think about the candidates the Republicans have put forth, right? Robert Dole in 1996 against Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, who is not a beloved former president, in fact, couldn't even campaign with Mitt Romney in 2000 and 2004. Let's just say that the GOP nominees have left a lot to be desired by me. But let's talk about what cost Mitt Romney, who I thought was one of the stronger candidates. Let's talk about what cost him this election, and let's not kid ourselves. He lost by a wide margin. He lost the popular vote. More importantly, he got killed in the Electoral College, right? Barack Obama ended up with well north of 300 electoral votes. States that were supposed to be in play all seemed to go for Obama, right? We're talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Nevada. All of them went for Obama. Mitt Romney could not even win his state, Massachusetts, or his running mate state, Wisconsin. Let's talk about what went wrong. Let me offer a few arguments. First, Mitt Romney's choice of Paul Ryan as his running mate. Let's just say that the first rule of politics is that you have to secure the election. You want to be in power, right? Here you had Mitt Romney with several available possible running mates who could have helped him in key states. The junior senator from Ohio, Rob Portman, for example. Marco Rubio in Florida with women, Kelly Ayotte, the senator from New Hampshire, right? These were all areas that Mitt Romney needed to improve. Poll after poll showed that the states of Ohio and Florida were key states, and that there seemed to be a gender gap with single women that worked to Obama's advantage. Let me also point out, too, that if the Romney campaign was a bit afraid of the financial history of Marco Rubio, you also had Bobby Jindal. If Romney wanted to look inclusive, understand you had very qualified people in very key parts of the country, or, who were members of groups who would have underscored the fact that Romney was being inclusive or was being strategic in terms of securing support in certain states. Instead, he grabbed Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan failed to deliver his own state. Paul Ryan also seemed to fail to deliver the youth vote. Right? Quite frankly, this was a blown pick. Let me also point out that I understand that Paul Ryan did give Romney some credibility in terms of fiscal responsibility. The idea that Romney was going to reduce the deficit. Here's the problem. Romney himself undercut that impression by pushing for an increase in military spending overseas. In other words, while he was talking about balancing the budget, while he was pointing out that he had balanced 4 budgets in a row as governor of Massachusetts, Romney was actually talking about more government spending overseas. Now, the GOP needs to figure out its coalition. It needs to figure out the voters who are open for joining with them. Right? Libertarians, supporters of Gary Johnson, who wanted a balanced budget today, who understand that deficit spending, especially the kind of systemic deficit spending that we've had for years, weakens our national security. It makes us financially vulnerable. Right? When we're listening to Mitt Romney, when Romney is talking about fiscal responsibility out of one side of his mouth, it's a mind-blowing turnoff to hear him out of the other side of his mouth talk about a huge increase in military spending, especially when the deficit reduction portion of his plan is overly vague and ambiguous. Right? It seemed as if Romney made a play by picking Ryan to look fiscally responsible, to look serious, and then undercut that by calling for more government spending overseas. Right? By touting really the Obama foreign policy of having a U.S. military presence in places like Libya. Shocking. In addition to the blown Ryan pick and the undercutting of the deficit reduction message with an expansive increase in military spending, Romney really hurt himself when, during a debate, He talked about how he would replace Obamacare, right? He had advertised that he would repeal Obamacare. During a debate, he actually mentioned that he would replace Obamacare with his own program that would actually insure those with pre-existing conditions. That was a head scratcher. Let me just say, you cannot have stickers or posters with your image that say repeal Obamacare, and then suddenly in a debate hint that you're actually in favor of the popular parts of the statutory scheme, right? If you're in favor of some mandated insurance scheme that covers pre-existing conditions, and I understand that that's popular, right? Well, understand that's a huge turnoff to those who want the free market to govern healthcare. It's also a huge turnoff to a group Romney could have won that were outraged, and I mean outraged, at the thought of government mandates, right? Mandated health insurance. Suddenly the government is telling you that you have to buy from a private vendor health insurance, or you're going to have to pay a penalty, right? Here, that group was, having read Repeal Obamacare and having seen Romney give speeches where he talked about how he would repeal Obamacare. And then, of course, when push came to shove, when Romney's in front of a national audience in a presidential debate, we find out, and I say we, because I'm one of these people, I find out that Romney's actually in favor of some health insurance scheme, right? Doesn't specify that he's going to do away with mandates. He's in favor of a health insurance scheme that still has the pre-existing condition part of Obamacare, but he's going to change the rest. The change seemed incremental, right? Those looking for change didn't want Obama light. It seemed as if Romney was trying to literally position himself as Obama light, right? He was going to give you universal health care. It was just going to be some marginally different program than Obamacare. That's how it came across. It was a head scratcher. You know, what Romney should have done, in my opinion, was really be firm. Talk about states' rights. Talk about the free market. Dispute the notion that the federal government should even be a part of some national health insurance program apart from what we have now in Medicaid and Medicare, right? Instead, Romney came across as a guy talking big. I'll repeal Obamacare. And then saying, well, I'll keep these parts of it, right? That doesn't work with the crowd that is outraged at the whole idea of Obamacare being found constitutional. Let me go one step further. In reference to states' rights, this brings me to my next issue. Some of us, and I say us, again, I'm in this group, view the war on drugs as an absolute failure. A dismal failure. Right? What that war has done is it's literally increased crime across the country. Well, the point is this. In the state of Colorado, a key state that Romney needed. You actually had on the ballot a drug legalization bill to legalize marijuana. Now, the point is this: whether you support legalization or not, right? It was a big issue in Colorado. It actually passed. That's how big it was, right? The majority of voters who voted for legalization, right? It didn't pass by 1 percentage point either, right? Here you have a state you need. You're supposed to be a small government conservative. Why didn't Romney make the argument that the war on drugs should be a state rights issue? That whether you agreed with legalization or not, the people of Colorado and Washington State should have the right to make the decision for themselves on whether to legalize marijuana. Why wasn't that an issue that he raised? What state would he have lost by raising that issue? Right? Does anyone really think that a Republican running for the presidency who draws a line in the sand and says this should be a states' right issue, and further, the war on drugs is costing the federal government umpteen billions of dollars, that's an area we can cut. That's an area that belongs with the states, especially given all of the states, and I'm in one of them, California, that have approved medicinal marijuana. Why didn't Romney grab that issue and make it part of his campaign? Especially given that many in the United States, poll after poll is showing, support legalization. It's a big issue for many. Certainly is a big issue for civil libertarians. Whether they, believe in recreational drug use or not, right? Romney, too cautious, wouldn't touch that third rail, right? Literally hid from it. He wanted to win the state of Colorado, but would not dare propose real change that would have been fiscally responsible and would have challenged the status quo. Keep in mind, all of this fast and furious, a lot of this violence down at the border is drug related, right? Romney could have literally, tied in Fast and Furious and, all of this crime at the border with the war on drugs, and could have made inroads with libertarians, for example, by, actually addressing an issue that was front and center in one of the states he needed to win. Didn't do it. Let me talk about another problem that Romney had. The party platform. You've got to be kidding me. I know every candidate at the GOP, when they get to the GOP convention, they always claim that they haven't read the party platform. Right? This party platform was a disaster. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, right? Just understand that Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. Period. Right? Mitt Romney should never have allowed the text of the GOP party platform to literally be in the final draft. It just lent itself to the Democratic argument that there was a war on women. There is no way to read that text without reaching the conclusion that if elected president, Mitt Romney might not enforce Roe versus Wade. What Romney should have done is he should have pointed out that, quite frankly, one of the jobs of the President of the United States is to enforce the laws. And that as long as Roe versus Wade was the law of the land, that's the law he was going to enforce. That, until it was no longer the law of the land, he was going to have to follow the letter of the law. Right? He should have been firm. He should have been upfront. He should not have allowed the language of the party platform to be so strident. It's so strident, it actually has anti-Sharia law language in that platform. Right? For those of us looking for an open-minded party, a party that, quite frankly, looked inclusive and not exclusive, that looked like it was actually going to enforce the laws of the United States as they are in 2012, the party platform language was a disappointment. Let me go one step further. Another issue that I thought Romney dropped the ball on. It's a personal issue. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. Immigration is a big issue. People need to understand that, before, in the 19th century, the United States just welcomed all immigrants. They didn't have the kind of hoops that they're trying to set up now. Given that Rick Perry, the governor of the state of Texas, is a bit more permissive on immigration than were people like Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, right? It's astonishing that Mitt Romney didn't position himself to be in a position where he would at least consider amnesty. I know it's a dirty word in Republican circles, but understand there is a very pro-free market group out there that is open to immigrants, which, of course, is part of our country's history. Right? Think about it. Barack Obama was trying to portray himself as being anti-amnesty. Romney actually would have shown leadership on the issue. What states would he have lost, given that we know the state of Texas is sympathetic to immigrants, as evidenced by Rick Perry's position on immigration, as evidenced by George W. Bush's lax enforcement of immigration? Keep in mind, Barack Obama, in his 4 years, has deported more people than George Bush ever did in any 4-year period of his presidency. Right? Mitt Romney, if he really wanted to reach out to people of color, not just Latinos, but also people like me from the islands, right, should have made the argument that we need amnesty. Isn't that what Ronald Reagan did? How did Mitt Romney get cornered, where suddenly he again is agreeing with Obama on immigration? Right? I mean, really, if you think about it, and I understand Obama passed some very tepid, prosecutorial discretion order, executive order, where he wasn't going to deport young people who had a history of being law-abiding here in the United States. Okay, great. But that's tepid. That's mild. Right? A lot of immigrants came over here when they were, older than 25 years old. Now, Mitt Romney made the argument during his candidacy that the Obama solution wasn't a solution. Well, you know what? Offer us one. Be specific. Be realistic. Let me just point out that states like Arizona already viewed Obama with suspicion on the immigration issue. Romney could have positioned himself, quite frankly, on the libertarian side of Barack Obama and could have said, I am in favor of amnesty given these circumstances. Of all the states that Mitt Romney won, ask yourself, which states would he have lost with that position? Do any of us believe that South Carolina or Louisiana were going to suddenly jump to the Democratic side if Mitt Romney actually came out in favor of amnesty? Let me point out, too, that he comes out in favor of amnesty, maybe he wins the state of Florida. 29 electoral votes. Not only that, maybe just that position alone would give him a credibility with people of color that he did not have by being anti-amnesty, right? He lost his entire moderate reputation. He looked like a guy moving too far to the right. Certainly, he was right of Reagan on the issue of immigration. I thought his position was a loser for him. Let's talk about another area where I thought Mitt Romney dropped the ball, right? This is a post-mortem where, I know I'm sounding very critical, but let's just throw out the laundry list. Wasn't the Benghazi issue misplayed? During the foreign policy debate, Mitt backed off Benghazi. I guess he was afraid of looking too strident on the issue. Okay, fine. But understand he could have played a different card on Benghazi. He didn't have to politicize the death of Americans during the terrorist attack on the embassy. What I believe he should have done was actually gone further and questioned our Libyan policy. What were we doing in Libya? Does anyone watching this video believe that Muammar Gaddafi was about to invade the United States of America? The guy had been the Libyan leader for decades, right? He wasn't invading us. Does anyone believe right now that the chances of the Muslim Brotherhood taking over Libya are less than they were before we invaded? Gaddafi was a dictator. He had power in Libya. All we did was bring in instability. Instability to the point where our ambassador in Benghazi was asking for more support. Right? It's near anarchy in Libya. And of course, these military exercises cost a lot of money, billions of dollars. Why didn't Mitt Romney challenge the entire idea of the United States invading countries that are not at war with us? The United States serving as paid mercenaries for other nations, right? They donate money. We have our men and women over there with their lives at risk, militarily fighting to topple governments that don't pose an imminent danger to the United States of America. Romney should have gone hard on that. He should have used Libya, quite frankly, as just an example of, misguided strategy, a misguided war, where we go in, topple a government, and then don't have any idea on what to do after the government is toppled. Instead, Romney soft-played it too much. I know some commentators like Mark Levin have made the argument that Reagan soft-played Iran during the 1980 debate with Jimmy Carter. That's completely different. Right? That's very different. Jimmy Carter wasn't trying to cover up the Iranian hostage crisis. Here, Obama's trying to cover up Benghazi. And also here, we voluntarily toppled a government, leaving conditions so ungoverned that our own embassy was at risk. So Romney really, in foreign policy, he wasn't ardent enough. He should have let Obama say whatever he wanted to say about Benghazi, and he should have just really hammered the idea that the United States of America should never topple a government when we don't know what we're going to do after that government is toppled, and when that government isn't an imminent threat to the safety of the United States of America. Romney did not do that. So in sum, Romney made some mistakes. He was great in the first debate, then he got a bit timid. He was too timid in repealing Obamacare. Should have been more strident. He was too timid in staying away from the marijuana initiative that was front and center in Colorado, staying away from the war on drugs, staying away from this assault on our civil liberties that now have us mandated to buy private insurance. He was too timid in talking about Benghazi. He was too timid in criticizing his own party platform. He was too timid in his choice of running mate. Right? The American people, in my opinion, want contrast. If you don't provide them with contrast, then they're going to go with the incumbent. Right? Romney, unfortunately, just didn't provide enough contrast. Let me just say, too, as a personal note, my mouth literally dropped when Romney, during the debate, said that he was in favor of some healthcare program that actually required, the treatment for people with pre-existing conditions. Now, let me just say, conceptually, I like the idea of people with pre-existing conditions getting help. Right? I think that's something we need to address. But understand that Obamacare is mandated health insurance. Right? It's the federal government telling you that you have no choice but to either pay a fine or buy something from a private vendor. Right? It just happens to be health insurance, but understand, government shouldn't have that power. That's the kind of issue that Mitt Romney should have drawn a line in the sand on. He didn't. In fact, it was worse than that. He was on the other side of the issue. He wasn't talking about whether government should have that power. He was just changing a few paragraphs of Obamacare. Right? He wasn't talking about having the United States withdraw from Europe militarily and save billions of dollars to help our fiscal bottom line at a time when our debt is hurting our national security. Instead, he was talking about having the Obama foreign policy, only beefing it up a bit with even more deficit-financed military spending. It cost him the election. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. I hope you visit us at keepingitfree.blogspot.com and at my financial site, wealthspinning.com. Thanks for watching.